Welcome to Canterbury, a cathedral city in southeast England where I live. I'm in city center and I am Dr. Corey Wrenn. I am a lecturer in sociology at the University of Kent and I specialize in animals and society. And I wanted to share this wonderful city with you, the amazing historic medieval city of Canterbury. And I'm going to take you through the city with a perspective that maybe you would not have used otherwise, a critical animal studies perspective. And so what we do in critical animal studies is that we look at the relationship between humans and other animals, but more specifically, we look at the experience of non-human animals, because non-human animals matter in their own right as sentient persons. In the sociological study of animals in society, we really pay attention to the role of animals in our economy. So certainly in the history of Canterbury, which we'll see in this tour, non-human animals have been really integral to a lot of the more foundational industries across the many hundreds of years of Canterbury's existence. And also, because Canterbury is a cathedral town, we also need to talk about the role that non-human animals have played in religious socialization. In this walking tour, I'm recording it during lockdown, so unfortunately I was not able to take you inside the cathedral, but that's fine. You can check out stuff online yourself, or when you get a chance to come here, or if you do live here and things open up, go investigate for your own self. But it is clear that non-human animals are all around in that religious iconography, because until really the 1800s, most people in the United Kingdom were not literate. Education was not mandated. So non-human animals were important storytellers, and they socialized the populace. So it's not just in the cathedral, but really throughout the city, we see non-human animals have just been woven into the very tapestry of the cityscape. And I hope that you will join me on this little walking tour. And I can't fit everything in it, but I think I'm hitting some of the major ones. And I hope that by the end of the tour, you will think a little bit more critically about the role that non-human animals have played in the development of Canterbury, but really in the development of human society more broadly, and consider non-human animals as persons in their own right. So pour yourself a drink, make a cup of coffee, cup of tea, and let's get started. All right, so if you're going to be following me on this tour, we start at the cathedral. Then we're going to walk over to the high street, hang a right, and walk all the way down to the end to Westgate. Then turn left into Westgate Gardens, loop around through the Tannery Fields, and then come through Greyfriars Gardens and come back to the city center. So we're starting here on Sun Street, heading towards the cathedral. I think this is interesting because it's the dog store right next to the barbecue joint, which just goes to show how confused we are with our treatment of other animals. We love some and we eat others. Pork & Co, I think, is now out of business due to COVID. So we're moving now towards the cathedral, and the cathedral butter market area used to be the space where bulls were baited. So the area where the war memorial currently is used to be the bull stake, and before this was called the butter market, was called the bull stake. One historian from 1640 writes, "Now for the name of the place, the bull stake, which it took from the baiting and chasing of bulls there, by an ancient order and custom of the city, used by the city butchers before their killing, not so much, if at all, for pleasure, as to make them man's meat and fit to be eaten, which bull's flesh without such baiting and chasing is not held to be." This was finally banned in 1835 with the Cruelty to Animals Act. So now we're heading down Butchery Lane towards the High Street, and we will hang a right, and you should immediately see the Santander Bank and the old Nasons. Now this is a spot where the old fish market used to be from way back in the day, from like the 1400s. Well, there's mention of it in the 1100s actually, and this used to be a church. This is the back wall of the church. The church is now demolished, but this was a major fishmonger spot. And also you'll see a rare horse memorial for the horses of the Great War, a trough there for them, no longer in use obviously. So this is a place where a lot of animal violence took place, but also a rare memorial to horses who suffered. And also, if you go back to the cathedral grounds, you'll see another an art installation there. It's much more recent. Over 8 million horses were killed in service. Okay, back down the high street. If you want to take a peek in the Beanie, the Museum of Canterbury, there's a lot of beautiful livestock artistry there. But just down the way, you'll see the Old Weavers, which is now a restaurant, and this is on the River Stour. This, unfortunately, is under construction as I'm recording this, but it's one of the most beautiful spots in the city and a legacy to the major silk industry that employed 1 out of 3 Canterburians in the late Middle Ages up through, I guess, through the 1800s or so. There's a lot of weaver architecture that's dotted throughout the city. Just got to keep an eye out for it. Here's a little pigeon who's a denizen of Canterbury saying hello, checking me out. Just quickly, there's Unboxed. This is a package-free, completely vegan grocer that's on the high street. Also got to point out the Lady Luck, which is owned by vegans, and they have an amazing vegan menu, and also just happens to be one of my favorite pubs. Can't wait for them to open up. If you keep going out to the end of the high street, you'll reach Westgate, so please go on through. We're going to head through the park that's to your left. All the way up the road here towards St. Stephen's, there used to be a vegan pub there, which unfortunately went out of business about a year before COVID hit. Westgate Garden is a wonderful place to check out some of the non-human folks who live in this community. Ducks, pigeons, river rats, egrets, herons, swans, and marsh hens, and lots of cool fish as well. You can take this all the way down to Chartham. This path just keeps going and going through sheep fields. It's a good time. My dog loves this part where all the ducks are congregating. Yeah. Also notice that there's a lot of street art in Canterbury that features non-human animals. So just going to show how important non-human animals are to the story of Canterbury and to the architecture of our city. Now, if you get to this part, we're outside of the main part of the garden, please hang a left. We're going to head now into Tannery Fields, so across this bridge. You might want to stop here and read some of these signs, which tell us a little bit more about the free living communities along the Stour River. The Stour River is in pretty okay condition, but it does face some issues with pollution from animal agriculture. So here's the Tannery Fields. The tanning industry used to be a major part of the economy in the 1800s. A lot of the tanning work that was done here went to create products used in the Napoleonic Wars. It was an extremely polluting industry. It lasted up until the 2000s, by the way. And of course, an extreme institution of violence against non-human animals whose flesh was used. There's a really interesting interpretive sign here if you want to take a peek at that when you visit for yourself. So there was a lot of slurry, buildup of corpses and chemicals. It was a very toxic sort of place. And here's some more interesting street art that commemorates the non-human animals who suffered for that industry. So keep on walking down back towards a spinoff of the River Stour here. And we're going to cross underneath the ring road. Notice once again the use of animals in the artwork here, which tells the story of the Pilgrim's Way. Horses that were used to transport pilgrims, horses used in wars. There's also images of cows and other animals that were integral to just the day-to-day life of Canterburians and surrounding Kent countryside. Keep going straight. Do not turn right here. Just keep going straight. We're going to go all the way through to the new building development on the site of the old tannery. So once again, we see how the legacy of institutionalized violence against animals and the economic exploitation has really become imbrued in the architecture and the name places in Canterbury. So you're going to have to wiggle your way through here and find your way towards Greyfriar Gardens. There's a bit of the park that's closed off to dogs, and as I'm recording this, there is a lot of construction going on. So just keep going through it. Eventually you should find Just keep an eye on the river and you'll find your way to Greyfriars Gardens. Mishka loves this. Let's go, let's go. She's a trash collector. That's her day job. So the Franciscan monks, by the way, and this site is very old, like 1,000+ years old. The Franciscan monks did a lot of, unlike many religious sects, were actually quite celebratory of non-human animals and did a blessing every year in October of the non-human animals. And here's an old guest house associated with the old monastery, which has basically been knocked down since good old Henry VIII trashed the place. So let's keep on going down here through the garden, and then you're going to work your way down Beer Cart Lane, and we're going to find St. Margaret's Street. So you're kind of curving back around to your left towards returning to City Center. It's a real shame as I'm recording this that there's a lot of construction going on, because this really is a beautiful street, a wonderful view of the cathedral. But the reason we're heading down this way, and by the way, the Stag does a great vegan menu. But we're heading down this way because this is the site of the newer fishmonger, the fish market, really. So the old fish market, of course, was on the high street for many hundreds of years, but there had been plans, at least since the 1700s, to move it over to St. Margaret's Street. The final fish market was not actually completed until the 1820s. Actually, in between, there was a time where the fish market was actually housed on Burgate. But for many hundreds of years, it was next to that church on the high street. So in the 1820s, they built this brand new fancy fish market. Obviously, today it is no longer in use. It's actually vacant at the time. The tea room that was inside there actually did not survive COVID. But the architecture does remain, and it is worth taking a peek at. And after you take a gaze at this, you might also pop into the Chipper, the city fish bar. As I'm recording this, it's the only fish and chips place in town that does a vegan menu. Then you want to move towards the high street again, and we are going to go to your right for just a second, and then swing an immediate left, because we're going to go right into Butchery Lane. As you're doing so, take a quick peek at the Pret. There's some old wood carvings there. This was reportedly a house of sin back in the day, but I just like it because it demonstrates kind of that muddling of the human-animal boundary, and it's an interesting legacy that's kind of remained in the architecture of the city. So the Butchery Lane actually used to be a poultry market, so it was a site of a lot of violence and cruelty against chickens, probably back towards the Roman times. But by the Middle Ages, it had turned into the place where the cows and bulls and other animals were taken to be, their bodies to be taken apart. So you can still see the Bull's Head there. That used to be a pub for the butchers after a long day's work of dismembering bodies. They would go over and have a pint. You can still see some of the hooks, the meat hooks that are remaining as a legacy to this. The actual last butcher that was there was in 1971 or so. So a lot of the meat hooks are still in situ. Fortunately today, yes, there's no more butchers. So I have many pleasant memories in this in Butchery Lane as a vegan with no animals being torn apart. And of course, a lot of these are also coming from that bull steak that was just outside the cathedral gates that we talked about at the beginning. Worth going into the Roman Museum after the Blitz hit. The Blitz destroyed a lot of Butchery Lane, and it actually uncovered some really old Roman architecture. As you're exiting Butchery Lane, keep an eye up above you. You can, again, still see some of the places where the meat hooks would have been, where bodies would have been hung. Very grim stuff. Especially down here at the corner, you can see one of the railings there where meat hooks were attached. The hooks at the top are actually just for the old windows. That's not where bodies were hanging. But here in the very bottom, you do see where dead bodies were hanging. Another shout out, if you haven't gotten a bite yet, you might want to pop into the Burgate coffee shop that's right here on the corner. They do really yummy vegan cakes. They always have some kind of vegan cakes in stock there. They do their own in-house almond milk as well. And on a nice summer day, you'll probably see me sitting outside working on some writing, eating some of that cake. So as we come back towards the cathedral, one thing I wanted to also point out, after a lot of those cows and other animals were baited, they were then taken down what was called Slaughter's Lane and Skinner's Lane, which have now been built over. And if you go over to the pottery shop, right next to the pottery shop, that used to be entrance to Slaughter Lane and Skinner's Lane. So, a little bit again of that legacy of the Butters Market is found in this old pub and the signage there. There's a wall plaque if you want to read more. There's another friendly denizen of Canterbury, a pigeon friend. But yeah, unfortunately, although the cathedral is a major site of pilgrimage and peace and retrospect, it was also a major site of extreme violence and suffering for so many non-human animals. So right behind this shoe store is where the entrance to Skinner and Slaughter Lane would have been. So from the Bull Stake to the Slaughter Lane to the Skinner's Lane to the Butchery Lane. Very gruesome legacy there. Don't forget to take a look at the cathedral itself, the carvings on the door, inside the cathedral. At the time I'm recording this, I wasn't able to get inside, but there's lots of amazing carvings and statues and other artwork that features non-human animals in the cathedral, just going to show how important non-human animals are to telling the story of a society. After the cathedral, if you still have a little bit more energy in you, you might walk out to go back down Burgate Street out towards the end of the city walls and hang a right and follow the city walls for a bit, because outside of the city walls was one of the major, so we've talked about all these markets, poultry markets, fish markets, the Bull Stake, the butter market. These were a major part of Canterbury industry, of course. It was a major trading town. But one of them has been completely demolished and really kind of lost from current memory is the cattle market that was outside of the main gate, the main entrance, the old Anglo-Saxon entrance to the city. When the ring road was put into place, it was destroyed, but also the Blitz did a number on it. But every week for hundreds of years, animals would be brought there to be sold, to be killed, to be eaten, to be ridden, to be used in all sorts of economy. So non-human animals really have been absolutely central to the growth of Canterbury. And I would say to truly appreciate the complexity of Canterbury's long and amazing history, it really would do us well to remember the contributions of non-human animals, both consenting and non-consenting, the positive and the negative. And unfortunately, a lot of it is negative. There's a lot of oppression and violence in Canterbury's history when it comes to non-human animals. But I think one step forward is to recognize that legacy and reinsert them into that historical narrative. So with that, I will leave it here. And thank you for joining me on this tour, me and Mishka. And I hope that if you don't live in Canterbury, you'll certainly come and visit it and look at it through this new perspective, through critical animal studies, and maybe stop for a meal in one of the lovely establishments that caters to vegans and support that animal-friendly business in town. So thanks very much.